Hi, this is Michael Uslan. You're listening to Batman on Film.
I'm vengeance.
I have given a name to my pain.
The Batman.
Always waiting for some Batman to save you.
It's simple. We kill the Bat of Gotham. I'm Batman.
Welcome to episode 96 of the Batman on Film Social Hour podcast. I am the host of this little old show here on Batman on Film, Bill Jet Ramey. Ryan, did I ever tell you, Ryan Haas, senior BOF contributor, did I ever tell you the story about how back in 1998 I created Batman on Film on a web TV? I haven't told that story very often, but I was wondering, have you been on the show? I told you that story before.
I think you have told me that story.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to be redundant here. I think I've told Lauer. There's another one. This is the Ryan show. So I don't have to go by Haas. I usually, if I have y'all individually, I can, it's Ryan. But now I've got the Ryan zone. The BOF Ryans are here. Ryan Lauer, how are you, sir?
I'm great. Thank you. Happy to be here. To a very humbling chapter this is, because here I thought I knew some things.
Mm-hmm.
And then the topic at hand, the specifics of it, I'm like, even if you think you know a lot, there's a lot to learn.
Yeah. Well,
on any subject.
What do I always say? You can always learn something, right? You're always learning. Always learn something. And doing this show, this is going to be, if you're listening, hopefully you're here listening out there somewhere. This is the final chapter by chapter episode for the Batman. It is chapter 19, and we're going to talk about the credits. And when people say, really, you're going to talk about the credits? Yes, specifically, not the entire credits. We're not going to talk about who was the key grip and all this, and how the key grip or boom operator, or best boy, how it influenced the Batman. We're going to talk about the special thanks, the individuals that director Matt Reeves gave a special thanks to, that you see at almost the very end of the credits. And after that, chapter by chapter will spin off to its own podcast, and we're going to start with Batman 89. And I know you can't see this, but Ryan Haas has a Batman 89 t-shirt on.
How about that?
So we're going to get to that. So Batman on Film, chapter by chapter, will be its own podcast. We'll start with Batman 89 here shortly. But let's go back to the most recent Batman live action solo film, The Batman, which came out this year. And here we are at the end, chapter 19, the credits. It's been a long ride here, Ron Lauer, right, on this?
It has. I did not look up and see when we did the first one.
Yeah. Did you... And I started all this with, like, you always learn something. I learned quite a bit throughout this experience, learned things and saw things about the Batman that I didn't notice. Even, I've seen it, probably 30 something times, but to watch it at 10-minute clips and really focus in has been pretty, it's been pretty eye-opening, to say the least. So let's get to this. Let's get to the credits. I want to start with this. I don't know. I told Lauer off before we started recording, Haas, that I kind of look at the people that are on here, and you think, okay, there was I found it like two groups. There were some things that you can see straight up Batman stories that were an influence on the Batman. And so you give shout out to those people. And then I think some of them also, this other category, or maybe are folks who were influences on Matt Reeves as a Batman fan.
Yeah, totally.
So we can get into that as we go through. So I want to ask you all, I'll start with you, Lauer. What, based on the folks that are listed here,
Mhm.
what do you see the comic book stories that were influences on the Batman?
Talent listed: Frank Miller, David Mazza. I hear it both ways. Kelly or
Mazzucchelli.
Chelly. Okay. David Mazzucchelli, both of them for year one. Obviously, Jeff
Okay.
Loeb, Tim Sale, Long Halloween.
Yep.
And I don't know if this is me thinking it or it's just because I heard Matt Reeves say it so much. Darwin Cook for Ego.
Yeah.
The Discovery itself, Gary Frank, Jeff Johns for the Earth One stories.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this is stories themselves. Um, and I actually did see, or I thought of for sure. These are like instant in watching it. I'm like, oh yeah, got it. Um, Greg Capullo, Scott Snyder for Zero Year.
Yep.
Mhm.
Um, and like looking at these, those are like the instant like stories I can feel
I
in
wrote
this.
down year one, Ego, Long Halloween, Earth One, 0 Year
Mhm.
when I looked at it.
Okay.
Haas, what do you think?
I mean, y'all have hit the highlights there. The two groups there, like the foundational core Batman stories, like Long Halloween and Year One, and then the
Mhm.
more modern ones that are definitely shaping this are Earth One, volumes 1 and 2 at least. Yeah, and 0 Year. Those are all the big ones that I noticed.
Okay, let's focus on those then. And continue on, Haas. What
Mhm.
of year one did you see in the Batman?
In Year One. Yeah, just the vibe,
Yeah.
Reeves would always and Reeves has compared to a lot of other Batman filmmakers has done lots of interviews and had a whole commentary on this home video release. And yeah, so you get your two core characters, Bruce and Selina. I think they're really uh, ripped from the pages of Year One. When Bruce, is the grifter, the drifter, you know,
Mm-hmm.
just what does he do when he can't be Batman? He's not really thrilled about being Bruce Wayne. You don't see a lot of Playboy Bruce Wayne in Year One. He's just back in Gotham, obsessed, trying to be Batman, and that whole general vibe is all over the movie. And then Selina as well, just being somebody that's like part of Gotham and is trying to find her place in it. But seeing Reeves like grab that and use other influences to kind of make his own vision of what Batman looks like in a Year Two era
Mm-hmm.
made the most sense to me.
When I first saw it, year one struck me almost from the beginning. When I saw him walking in the streets in the rain at Halloween, I'm like that, the drifter Bruce Wayne. I went and the journal, the voiceover, which ended up
Mm-hmm.
being a journal. He's keeping a journal. I'm like, this is year one. This is year one inspired, and as you said, the vibe of the film overall is very year one-ish. And I say, Lauer, I think we talked about this. Am I wrong to say that you didn't see the year one as strongly as I did, and
With
Haas
the
apparently did, or
with him
were you
walking
on
through the
that?
streets at
Where
the
you?
beginning,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
did not connect with year one instantly by
Okay.
looking at that. There was something with definitely with Selena, like that one jumped out to me right away of like, oh yeah, this is Selena year one, 100%. Um, there is a little bit in some of Mazzucchelli's art. I think it's represented really well on screen with different parts of Gotham, and Batman and stuff like that. I do think that to me felt it. Uh, but yeah, I mean him, you know, as a streetwalker, I just for some reason I didn't, and maybe that was because it wasn't directly lifted of him in the stocking cap and a
Mhm.
star on his face and that stuff. Maybe that's why I didn't think of it right away. But I know you almost revoked my Bat fan card because I didn't get it and everybody else
That's not,
did.
sir, that's not my job. That's someone else's.
Okay, my bad. But yeah, so I felt like, oh no, I missed out on something that everybody else got. But it's okay. It's
What
fine.
do you see it now? Are you still kind of like, I don't see it as much as Bill Ramey does?
I pointed out because everybody else saw it and I didn't. I think even Reeves might have made a comment about that at some point that I saw or read or too. So it's just like, oh, so I know that's it because I've been told that's it. I still don't
Okay.
fully 100% get that, but I mean,
Well,
it makes total sense.
it is, more more subjective, you know,
Mhm.
when you the way you take influences anyway. So let me lead you into this, since this is your favorite Batman story, Long Halloween. You
Oh
saw Long
yeah,
Halloween in it. Okay. So all right.
yes,
Tell
I
us
did.
about that. Okay. Because I did
Well,
too. Yeah.
definitely. I mean, the scar does not show up on Falcone's face until Long Halloween. It's not there until year one. Um, that obviously. And then when Falcone says to Bruce on the steps about his dad operating on him, I was like, that's flat out Long Halloween, in which we talked about too, that Totoro was the one that came up with that, of including that in the movie. So he did his homework. I got that. Obviously, the fact that it takes, like, it opens up on Halloween, of course, will get everybody to think, oh, it's Halloween, it's all Halloween. But then there's the noir vibe also,
Mm-hmm.
and playing heavily in shadows and stuff like that. To me was flat out long Halloween influenced. Obviously not the same kills on holidays and all that stuff. This was not straight from the pages, a live action adaptation. It was an influence on mood. And then that little bit that Totoro brought to me, like, got me
Mm-hmm.
giddy.
Haas, speaking of Long Halloween, continue with
Mhm.
respond to Lauer, and also I was just thinking, both the Dark Knight and the Batman are inspired by Long Halloween or influenced by Long Halloween, but they use it in different ways,
Mhm.
right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, the Dark Knight would use it more as the obviously the Two-Face stuff, and then the escalation, the a lot of the big plot of the Long Halloween revolves on Gotham transitioning from a city of run by the mob to Batman in the middle, and the freaks taking over. That's not as prevalent in the Batman. It takes more of the mob angle, the crime stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and Batman is emerging and freaking people out. And it doesn't quite get to that tipping point with a villain yet. Because largely in the city at large in the movie, the Riddler, he takes over the minds of the people kind of in a way, but it's not as much as a really but he's like the only main major villain that's like showing
Yeah.
his face or lack thereof in the city.
Do you either of you see? We know Tim Sale did the art on the Long Halloween, the late great Tim Sale. Do you see? So he's going to be included if they're going to acknowledge the Long Halloween. Do y'all see any of his Batman art in the Batman? Like Tim Sale inspired in any way, or make?
I
Because
don't,
I
because I
Not
do.
necessarily, yeah.
I feel like
yeah
Sale's a bit exaggerated with his Batman art, and that's not
yeah
a criticism. I think he is a little exaggerated, and I mean, I just reread the Haunted Night collection, and to see the jump of what he did with Batman's cape between that and the Long Halloween, like the Long Halloween started to bring in like the long, and then the tips of it's like the cape had a
Mind of its own.
personality of its own. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
yeah
like the tips of that curving, and it started to
yeah
get a little exaggerated and stuff. And that just appeal or doesn't seem to fit into Reeves's world. Wouldn't that be something though? of like as he's talking, it's almost like it plays like the symbiote on in the Spider-Man movies, and the capes behind it just like
Yeah.
curling and moving.
Yeah. And Kelly Jones is like, well, I can take this a step further.
Yeah,
You know?
I can go further with this.
And the cape starts talking to Batman.
Have you seen the 90s variants that are coming out? There's one that's got Batman and Superman where the capes are so crazy they're like flowing in front of their faces.
Oh yeah.
blocking it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny.
I can say that I got ego pretty strongly from the Batman. The struggle Bruce Wayne is having not being Batman. He's basically in the movie, he is Batman consumed, or Batman consumes him. And that's all there is. There's really like Bruce Wayne doesn't even exist until the later, later in the film. That's part of the arc. So I of course we don't see Bruce Wayne having this conversation with Batman like we see in Ego, but I get the inspiration totally. What do y'all think?
Go ahead, Oz. You can go first. I think I keep jumping in fast.
That's okay. Yeah, like he's definitely consumed by Batman, and that's one of the things that people seem to have either love it or you hate it. I haven't seen a lot of middle grade in there. Even the people that,
because it doesn't exist. It's one or the other.
It's one or the other.
Damn
yeah,
it.
exactly. Yeah. It's definitely one of the things in the movie that sets that Bruce Wayne apart from other interpretations, to have one that's so consumed by Batman that Bruce Wayne, real or perceived fake Bruce Wayne, doesn't exist, or the movie focuses on Batman so much that it's trying to show that his mission really is the only thing that he's there for. You get a little bit of that in The Dark Knight Rises, of course, but it's not. It's a different take on it. And for me, I was unsure about that when going into the movie, but it made total sense the way it was executed. And like you said, Bill, because it is part of the arc, it pays off towards the end of the movie.
It pays
really
off.
well.
I can't imagine not being so upset with, I didn't see Playboy fake Bruce Wayne, to where you don't get to enjoy. I think
The movie.
that was the most powerful connection I've had to Batman, and Bruce was in the Batman because of his turn starting, when he visits Alfred, and Alfred, extends
that's
his
one of
hand,
the most best scenes in the whole movie for me. Yeah.
And it continues, from that point on up until we get to the end, where he's when he beats the shit out of that last goon Riddler follower.
Yeah.
And then he says, I'm, who in the hell are you? And I'm vengeance. And, it just snapped. That's like the final little domino falling in his head of like, this was me. And then, and then he just comes heroic Batman. Hold it. He reaches out his hand to the kid, just like Alfred reached out his hand to Bruce Wayne in the hospital. But that's getting on another tangent. But we can still talk about it because it's part of the film. But yeah, I mean, that was just great stuff.
Speaking about that, the whole the straight up line, I'm vengeance, and that transition from being a symbol of vengeance to a symbol of hope for the city, like that is right out of Batman Ego. Those lines and that and the end of Ego, like it's all right there.
So I was a little I know that Reeves said from that first fandom conversation that he brought up Batman Ego, and I was not worried, but I was like, interesting. Ego is not like one of my go-to Batman stories whenever I have free time and I want to revisit. Because it's a different kind of tale, it's not big action fighting sort of stuff. I think it's good. That's not like a negative. I was slightly like really interested and intrigued to see how Ego was such an influence for Reeves, because like, are we gonna have like because you get that book and you have Bruce looking at a monitor that's got Batman and they're talking back and forth, and then the Batman is like haunting him as
Yeah,
in
Batman's
stuff, and I'm
got
like,
crazy.
what are
He's
they?
got crazy ass teeth, and
And I was,
yeah.
how's he gonna do this? I hope that doesn't come, but we'll see the movie. We'll see the movie. So I was relieved at how restricted he was in the influence of ego, but in which I think that the most you can get is the journal, the journal readings as he's doing like a self-analysis and reliving what he just went through the night before and stuff like that. And that's where, and then the idea of bridging the gap of vengeance and hope and stuff, like I was really happy that that was the route he took it instead of like a direct, here's a monster Batman or sort of approach. Maybe that's a deleted scene that he didn't include.
You could have had, if he did that where, Bruce is down in the Bat Cave and he has those monitors, he could look up and there's Batman, and he starts having this conversation and Batman goes, "You son of a bitch." What the hell going on here?
I mean, I'd have allowed it. I'd been fine with it. I'm like, wow, they really know what they have here with those lines.
So talk about, what do you see with Earth One?
Earth One is definitely okay. So like Ego has the symbol of terror, to symbol of hope, but Earth One is the one that actually has the "I'm vengeance" line in it. And that one has, Earth One has kind of popularized this more like militaristic, harder edged Alfred that I see a lot of in the film. White goatee, like drill sergeant Alfred. You totally see that in the movie. And it's got a more ground up realistic Batman. You see the way that Gary Frank does all that artwork. It's very intentional. The way that they've drawn the cowl is more, it's more like Bruce and Alfred kind of creating the Batman, and you've got like the realistic eyes. You don't have the white eyes as in most comics in that, and a lot of takes on characters that are just slightly atypical from the comics. How like the Penguin's the mayor in the high society, and the Riddler stuff in the volume 2 of Earth One is very, very similar, all the way down to the plot of blowing up the city and things like that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Lauer.
Okay.
No, go.
I'm Vengeance, which was from that first trailer, and then the Riddler, because Earth One Volume 2, it was probably the first time people started complaining that the Riddler wasn't wearing a onesie. His whole plot of 7 vans with bombs from the movie, like the Riddler had vans with bombs. Then, yeah, I think like not the first to do it, but you can see Alfred, not straight up just a butler. I do think that Andy Serkis, even though we didn't get a ton, a little bit of that relationship distance in the Earth One books, I think had impressed Reeves to use in the movie. And then, I mean, even as much as Thomas Wayne for mayor, like that was in the Earth One books too. Not saying that was the only place that it's ever been, but it's like those quickly to me were, that was definitely kind of like how Selina jumped instantly made me think of Year One. It's like those things instantly made me think of Earth One from the movie. It's almost like in the line from Chihiro on made me think Long Halloween. Those are just some of the snap instant things to me.
And I forgot the probably one of the bigger influences too is like, it's right off the bat in Earth One Volume 1, you see that this is a early, not at his peak Batman when he fires the grapnel launcher and misses the building and falls down. Like there's a moment like that in the Batman where he like jumps off the roof, and he doesn't have this like Keaton-esque like roll and I'm great,
Yeah.
landing. Like
Not my first rodeo.
yeah, exactly. He like lands on the ground and barely makes it up, That felt like that was kind of a good parallel.
I agree with both of you on the Earth One stuff. I would say it didn't hit me as strongly upon first viewing as the others did, but yeah, it's definitely there. So that's shout out to Jeff Johns and Gary Frank. Ego shout out to Darwin Cook, late great Darwin Cook.
And some of these are also because they're all so fresh in my mind because they are
Mhm.
stories that I've reread quite a bit. So I've
Yeah,
reread the Earth
and
ones a lot.
Earth One,
Year
Volume
one.
3 had just come out,
Yeah.
relatively recently. So yeah, they were definitely on my mind. Yeah, we were even talking about them, Lauer, when Volume 3 came out, and I started to reread the early ones. And as I found references, I was texting you guys. I'm like, look, the Visions thing is right in there.
It's right
Yeah.
there. Oh my god, it's all connected.
Yeah.
So that's why, that's why those are so easy. Whereas some of the deep pulls in this thank you, special shout out list and all that maybe doesn't click because I'm not as familiar to where some of the stories that those creators wrote or illustrated. Maybe it's just as obvious in those stories as Earth One and Year One is to us. It's just haven't reread those or even read some of those as often.
I would say that to finish up here, Zero Year, pretty recent. Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo.
What was it? What stood out? Was there anything instant for you on Zero Year?
The contact lens cameras.
Contact lens.
That's real. That's very subtle. The flooding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the flooding. That's what I picked up on. The jog. And I mean, oh, okay. Yeah.
At the end, the shape of almost the little, I mean, I don't know if you'd call it subtle. I think it's subtle because it's not a big old, like, this is a bat on the front, but this shape, I think is like it. Like one of the first time we see Batman in Zero Year, he's on that bike.
And just
that
just the red. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No. I'll
Bill first, then Haas.
Real quick. The motorcycle at the end with the bat, shield. Lauer, that shield's made out of diamonds, and that's why Mr. Freeze is going to be after Batman scene. But go ahead.
That's in the sequel. He's like, son of a bitch took my bike.
Batman 2, Heart of Ice, so original. We all know it's I mean, it's your Zero Year is yet another good tale of like early Batman paralleled with like where Gotham is at too. And I feel like those things are right on the level in the Batman, and a lot of really great Batman stories like don't ignore where Gotham is at as well, and where how Batman is affecting that, or not enough or too much. So Zero Year has definitely got that. The makeshift Batman on the motorcycle, that's definitely part of it. And the Riddler, everything the Riddler does in terms of being somebody that feels like they are doing what they think is the right thing to do, but that happens to make them a villain. And trying to show things, corruption in the city to the masses, like that's part of it.
I also wrote down, and I don't know if there's anything specific story-wise, but there's a strong, and this is because this is where I cut my teeth as a Batman fan in the comics. It was in the 70s. There's a 70s vibe here from the 70s comics in the Batman. I think that's where you get your Marshall
Roadster
Rogers
Batmobile too, right? It was more of a car in the 70s.
Steve Englehart, Neil Adams. I mean, the car being a muscle car, Neil Adams, drew it early on as kind of a Camaro / Firebird type of muscle car, Mustang. You get, the Neil Adams and then, Denny O'Neil, all that. lots of 70s, just a 70s vibe. And I'm sure Matt Reeves and I are the exact same vintage. So I'm sure he read a lot of the comics I did as a kid by
He
those
mentioned
guys.
so much in all of his, anytime that somebody would talk to him about, influences of, these 70s films,
Mm-hmm.
that it just, I think we were all probably aware of it, but the fact that we're familiar with that source material of, Neil Adams and then also Strange Apparitions,
Mm-hmm.
there is like a vibe there that we can, I think, does translate to screen. The
Yeah.
movie does not feel dated in any way or like this takes
No.
place in the 70s, but it's like there is something about that
Well,
kind of vibe
it's
that I
that
think you pick up
detective
on.
noir vibe. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. Uh, one last overt inspiration. This would be visually Lieber Mayhew's version of the bat suit
I'm
in
unfamiliar.
Batman.
Who's this Bermejo guy?
I see a l- I see a little bit of Lee in it, just a
A little
little,
bit. Just a little bit.
just a little bit, huh? Lauer, since you're a Lieber Mayhew super fan, I mean that suit is straight up Lieber Mayhew. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. And in Lee, let's see. Remember he did for the Batman, he did a nod to the year one image up against the brick wall. And,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
and he did the Batman suit, but you could almost like you could take away the Batman title and it would just be like, oh, look at that. He did a cool year one nod in the Lieber Mayhew style suit. Like you wouldn't even necessarily can need if the Batman hadn't, I don't know. All this is just to say, like, yes, I fully agree.
Yes.
I think we talked to him. Did we talk to him about the imposter suit, or maybe it was on something else? I don't know. I'd heard him even say if he wasn't even for the imposter cover, that like he wasn't trying to do the Pattinson suit, but you just kind of seem like, man,
that was with
those
us.
are
Yeah.
maybe it's just like one little bit removed, and otherwise it's all like, oh, it's so similar. So yeah, absolutely. With that, almost more so that we'll see. I think now the Joker design is being Joker influenced, like his illustration, and with that, Bermejo's number one partner, Brian Azzarello. Azzarello has a history of doing very grounded, gritty stories as well.
Mm-hmm.
So Joker, and then Batman Broken City is very very gritty, that Eduardo Rizzo did the art of, but he didn't get a shot at, so I don't know that story influenced much for Reeves, because I feel like if that story did it all, he would have been shout out too. So I think Azzarello's name is also in the credits, so I feel like it's very Joker based on that influence. But
Yeah. Haas.
Yeah. I mean, you
Yeah.
guys covered it.
Yes.
Yeah. Every time I see the Lee Bermejo Batman, I always wonder, I think of, armor front flight suit Batman, and this totally fits that vibe. But again, it's not like a lot of other influences in the film. It's not just a straight lift. It's take this and how do we push it into this overall new vision where it's more self-constructed and it fits a slightly different vibe. It takes because Bermejo's fits more into this modern day aesthetic.
Yeah.
And there's that little like noir twist that Reeves has on this.
Doesn't year one, volume one, isn't there stitching shown on the Earth one? Yes, I'm sorry. Isn't there stitching on the cowl, Gary Frank?
It's a lot. Yeah, you can see the it's not a smooth cowl. You've got it's more constructed. Yes.
So that's what we got for the, like I say, the overt, ones that were just straight up obvious inspirations. And of course, in Reeves has talked about it as well. Any final words, either one of y'all, on this part of the credits and those folks he mentioned?
I think this fits under that, but oh my gosh, I'm looking for his name, Kyle Higgins, and then Trevor McCarthy.
Yeah, and Scott Snyder. That you get Batman Gates of Gotham.
There you go.
Yeah, that's a
Edward
clear
Elliott. So when the
Yeah.
Elliot name was brought up, the Edward Elliot, that's a descendant of Tommy Elliot in Gates of Gotham.
Hmm. And that whole book is about, Batman uncovering this like, very long running corruption in the city. Like, so
Yeah.
it's not exactly the same mystery per se, but
No, and
it's
I mean
that
it's
same
a
vibe. That's the
and
same.
it's in that era of Bill's favorite, the Batman Omega Sanction
Yeah.
um
Oh,
Return.
Joker
It
Rich.
leads into the return of Bruce Wayne. Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
but Dick Grayson's under the cowl. But I mean, that's
Hmm.
a really good story. I do like that story quite a bit. And yeah, I mean, just to pull from that, like you said, yeah, Haas uncovering a city's history, but then also just a flat out mention of Edward Elliot.
All right, let's move on to some of these other shout outs, some of these other folks. Um, some of these I knew, some of them I did not. So I educated myself a little bit. I want to say that several of these were probably, I mean, they've got to be influences just on Reeves as a Batman fan and his Batman fandom. I mean, Jerry Robinson, I don't see anything specific. I would say that's Jerry Robinson, but Jerry Robinson had such a huge influence on what is Batman, from back in the day that, I
Hmm.
mean, you got to include him because I would say after Bob Kane and Bill Finger, I mean, it's almost Jerry Robinson. You can make a case that he could get that, acknowledgement as well
Yeah. Well,
as they
plus as
do.
a co-creator of the Joker too, when you look
Yeah.
at the way that they took that very early, scarred kind of individual
Yeah.
and went that way with it.
Because Reeves did say he he went with the part of the inspiration for the Joker was the Man Who Laughs silent movie. Conrad Veidt, I
Hmm.
believe,
Hmm.
played Gwendol Payne. I forget how to pronounce that correctly. The man, the man who
The
laughs,
man who laughs.
yeah. So with the carved face, but or
It was
he and
That should have
actually,
disfigured and
been
he
a
can't.
it,
Yeah.
wouldn't that have
yeah,
been
and
something
the
if it was the Joker's credit in the movie was the man who laughs, not the
yeah,
unseen Arkham prisoner?
because
I know.
yeah,
Wow.
because
There's
the
still time.
character in the man who
Yeah.
laughs, he's not a cut smile. It's he was born with this
The-
frozen affliction,
yeah.
and this is what that Reeves went with. He has some sort of affliction that causes him to have this permanent smile. Bob Haney, old school Batman um, writer. Did you know he created the Teen Titans? They're not in the
I did
film.
not know this
He
until
created Enchantress,
looking this up. Oh, she was
not in the
awesome in Suicide
film.
Squad, right? Sorry.
Yes. Metamorpho, the Element Man. But I think he hung his hat on Batman. Lots of Batman the Brave and the Bold stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I've knew about Mr. Haney. Steve
With
Lieber.
Neil
Go ahead.
Adams
Go ahead.
illustrated
No,
some of his
yeah.
issues, right?
Yeah.
Um, I'm trying to think because I read quite a bit last or earlier this year of Brave and
Some
the
of
Bold.
these, yeah, some of them are old school, classic, golden age, silver age guys. Some of them are relatively new. Y'all, I just want to
Yeah.
mention, y'all chime in and with thoughts when I go through these. Steve Lieber, Bruce Wayne murderer.
Totally unfamiliar with. Well, I was with Bob Haney. The name sounded kind of familiar,
Yeah.
but Lieber, yeah, I had no clue on Lieber.
Myself. Ron Haas, any thoughts
Same.
on either one of them? Okay. Jack Schiff was interesting. I did not know that he was the editor over Batman from 1942 to 1964, and he was replaced by Julie Schwartz.
Heard of that guy?
He is responsible for the story Detective Comics number 60, the case of the what was it called? Case of the Costume Cloud Killers. The bat signal was introduced
Okay.
in that issue. And he brought in some of the more fantastical elements into Batman comics that we saw in the 50s and early 60s. And that's when they made a editorial change in 64 with Julie Schwartz. I can't say that I saw any of that stuff. Well, the bat signal is in the Batman. Yeah.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
There you go.
We have a signal.
They have seen it.
Y'all mentioned Kyle Higgins.
The gorilla. I was gonna say the gorilla boss of Gotham City. You know, that's obviously not in the movie either. But
Y'all mentioned Kyle Higgins. I was unfamiliar. I was familiar, but unfamiliar. You know, with the name.
yeah, it was that's he co-wrote Gates of Gotham and a lot of Nightwing. You know, when I reviewed Nightwing for BOF, he did. I think was it the New 52 Nightwing? Yeah, I think a lot of that. And he's done some Batman Beyond stuff. He did some really good Batman Beyond 2.0 comics also.
Have you read Gates of Gotham, Bill?
I have not.
I think it's worth reading.
It's worth reading for sure.
Dick Grayson is Batman, but they don't do any kind of let's talk Omega sanctioning or anything like that. It's just it's
a good like
cool
Gotham world building kind of book.
Okay.
The history of Gotham.
Irv Novick, I was familiar with.
He's like a I don't know, underrated, overlooked 70s Batman artist, right?
Yes.
And I was looking that up, and he and the more realistic Batmobile is part of his time. You know, he's in the same time era as, you know, Neil Adams as a regular on the books.
Yes, he is part of along with Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams were part of that group who brought Batman back to his dark and serious roots. Started in 1969. He did the art for One Bullet Too Many as Batman 217, 1969. That's when they sent Dick Grayson off to college, and Batman moved out of Wayne Manor to downtown Gotham in a penthouse. And where does he live in the Batman? He lives in a penthouse in Wayne Tower. So yeah,
Novik was. I was telling before we started recording with Bill, I was going through my Tales of the Batman Len Wein collection, and he did quite a few illustrated stories with Len Wein, including one with the Gentleman Ghosts. So that's where I was like, I know that his name sounded familiar, but I couldn't track down specific stories. And yeah, there's some in there that he did with Len Wein that are pretty damn good.
Edmund Hamilton. He was just an early Batman Detectives comics guy, 40s to the 60s. That's got to be someone whose work that Matt Reeves was familiar with.
Made Reeves a fan.
Yeah. I did not know who Stas Johnson was.
Oh, Stas Johnson. That's your 90s artist.
Yes.
Oh yeah, Cataclysm and No Man's Land. Yeah, starting to go through some of that with Pete.
Yeah.
Banana Pockets himself. And yeah, he's Stas Johnson.
Yeah, for when you say Stas Johnson, I think of Tim Drake Robin. He's done a lot of art for that, and that we've started to kind of cover on the Everyone Loves the Drake podcast recently. So we're kind of in that Stas Johnson era there.
Trevor McCarthy, the 2000s
artist.
So it's contemporary. Yeah. Didn't know this individual, but I can, after doing some investigation, I can see Bronwyn Carlton. She had a run on Catwoman a while back. Batman Officer Down was on that one as well.
And I think she did at least one book in No Man's Land.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
So that some of the others are more, these were some of the ones that I thought were maybe I had to do a little research on, but we know, okay, I'm going to throw these out and y'all just have a reaction. Chuck Dixon.
90s Batman, like to a T.
Him and his usual partner, Graham Nolan, who was almost like a living Bane. He posts his stuff on Instagram, and yeah, he is a very muscular man. Those two, other than like the Batman ending on what could possibly be like a No Man's Landish thing. I don't know the influences they're directly tying into the Batman from Haas. This is your
Hmm.
area.
They were their style of comics and storytelling are it's so tight and so well crafted as comic books to me of that era.
Mhm.
When you read their stories, they really like to kind of thread the needle, like where you're reading a story. It's really masterful the way you could read a story. There's always the A plot, there's always the B plot, but sometimes
Gotcha.
you'll get like a page here that's like, oh, but this thing's coming, don't think about that. So like you can see some thread the needle things in the Batman. It's not maybe as like hit you over the head. It's very subtle, right?
Sure.
Where you can think of like, oh, I can see where these little branches could go off from this movie for a sequel or whatever. But that's kind of what, and a lot of Dixon stuff always did have a fair amount of detective elements to it.
Yeah.
There was
Yeah.
usually some sort of point. It was a lot of action, but it was a lot of good, like balanced stuff between the character, a lot of good character dynamic work, and a lot of detective work in Dixon writing.
Ed Brubaker.
I'd team him with Greg Rucka, and it's funny because I have not read Gotham Central, the highly acclaimed Gotham Central, but I know Kinsey from the Batman is a character in Gotham Central. And then actually our boy Bill, you son of a bitch.
Yes.
Bach. I actually got to him. I meant to mention it earlier. I don't know if he's in Gotham Central, but he isn't. And going through the road to No Man's Land right now, Bach is in the comics. He's not a son of a bitch.
There's Mackenzie Bach and Kinsey.
And Kinsey, yeah.
So I just remember Kinsey is what does Batman say? Who's the broken nose? He's the broken nose. What's the line exactly?
Oh man, I don't know. Yeah. Moonlights for the Penguin, or mainly moonlights as a
moonlights the cop,
I don't know.
Says.
Where's our script book?
Yeah,
yes.
Mine's on the way. It's not here yet.
Yes. And then I always remember, Mackenzie Bach goes, you son of a bitch. A lot of these guys go together, and I'm glad you are pointing it out. Jim Aparo.
I mean, possibly Mount Rushmore of Batman artists.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure.
He across so many eras too, from like what was it, like 70s to 90s basically.
He was so much Brave and the Bold 70s and 80s, and then got into like the main Batman title and like detective stuff. I think toward the back half of the 80s and then into the 90s, and then it was almost like a baton from him to Breyfogle, and that was my introduction to Batman. So my intro were like the goats.
Most of these I think we've mentioned all already. Let me see, make sure I don't miss anything out. I think we talked about Jeff Johns and Gary Frank. That's Earth One for sure.
I got one for you.
Yep.
Dick Sprang.
I'm just getting there. Thank you.
How about that?
My mind. Yeah. Yes, Dick Sprang. Haas, did you know that Dick Sprang is probably the most influential artist on Lee Bermejo when it comes to Batman?
I have not heard that story.
He told me in Lauer that in person. Well, kind of in person.
That's amazing.
On Zoom. Yeah.
He loves Dick Sprang. And I mentioned to him, I was like, that's like hearing that Bill loves Batman as R&R. It just
so what was the
reasoning?
What was the reasoning? Just the fact that he could like get like just these crazy iconic and then Bermejo even had like kind of a Dick Sprang homage cover recently on
I got a poster
anniversary issue. It's excellent art.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit of like a different, and you see Dick Sprang, it's Dick Sprang.
Yeah.
From what I remember, it's like that was some of what he'd said.
Like the signature style. Yeah, like even when you look at the kind of Batman art you would see in Dick Sprang's era, you can tell what isn't Dick Sprang.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think of Matt Reeves liking the '60s show and that era and that period with the iconic villains and stuff. I jumped to Dick Spring too, because those are like the classic, very classic
Dick
caricatures of
Spring's
the character.
Joker is you know it when you see it.
Mhm.
Like any of the Batman characters, right? Like you said, Dick
Yeah,
Spring. Because when I think of
it's got that cartoonist slant to it where it's
yeah,
very very stylized.
It's
yeah,
it's one of the names that definitely, in first seeing in the special thanks, that stood out to me because it fits right along with Bill, like I said, of you and Zernar and Bermeo and Dick Sprang, of like, oh, really, the Batman, perhaps the darkest Batman movie yet. And that's like such a Sprang was such a bright and fun era of Batman. It's really like, huh, what
when
did
I
this do?
think
But
of
maybe
when I think of
helped make
Golden
him a
Age,
fan.
it's probably when I think of Golden Age Batman, I think of Dick Spring. That version of. I mean, you see it in the Brave and the Bold animated series.
Oh yeah.
And so maybe in reading
Yeah.
through a lot of these names, it made me realize of like, this is, I mean, isn't it called special thank you, or what's
Special
the
thanks, yeah,
special thanks? It's not
yeah.
saying we have to give credit also too. So it's not, so as we've been throwing names back and forth here, it's like some of them we do see, oh, their work did pop up in the movie. Some of these are probably just like fan appreciation, from Matt
Mm-hmm.
Reeves and crew. So not every single one has an exact, like,
Mm-hmm.
Dick Sprang
I think there's definitely
communications was not a sign in Gotham in the movie.
like we said in the beginning. I think there's the ones that are just obvious that we talked about in the beginning, and then the ones that were, it's the fan part from Matt Reeves that he wanted to mention, because I get some of them since, again, we're the same age. Anybody I'm missing here? Hell, I would have a lot of these on here if I was throwing out a special thanks. I'd probably even throw in. I would have thrown in Adam West. Just,
Yeah.
I mean, he's not an art. I know he's. I know what he was going for here. He was giving credit to artists and the writers who often don't get the credit.
Yeah.
But there's no way that Matt Reeves wasn't influenced by the '60s TV series either.
It's starting to become a little bit of a habit too, because I do know, James Gunn put it in the credits of the Suicide Squad. And I'm not saying it never happened before that, but it almost was like a section just like this with as many names included. And I think Black Adam had the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is starting to become a definite, and I'm not saying it's not in other movies either. It's definitely been noticeable here as of late.
I will say, and this, Lauer, because Lee told us, Lee was very honored by the fact that his name was in those credits. I mean, genuinely honored, and was extremely proud that they used his Batman as influence on the aesthetic of the suit in Pattinson's Batman. All right, so boys, final thoughts on the special thanks, and then just final thoughts about. I want to just in this series, the final thoughts in the Batman chapter by chapter, final thoughts about the Batman as a film overall.
Have at it, Hoss.
Okay. Yeah,
Hoss,
I
go
mean,
first.
this I think we've got a lot more out of the special thanks section than I even anticipated, because it's really fun. It's a fun exercise to go through any of these Batman movies and kind of get the influences out of it. And we've done this exercise kind of amongst ourselves and during podcasts for other films. They were very overt in the Zack Snyder era, but it was really fun trying to pick the ones out for the Dark Knight trilogy. This one is very interesting for the Batman because it's such a big special thanks section, and because Reeves has been very forthcoming in interviews and commentaries about what his influences were. This one was cool because it's equal, like we've been talking about, it's equal parts like explicit references and equal parts like Batman history appreciation, because all these people, it's Batman is not a one person show. Like it's been 80 years of collective knowledge and work being put together to keep this character moving forward. And Reeves obviously like realizes he is right now the steward of that, and as the person carrying the Batman torch at large, it's really cool to see him be able to give those people that kind of credit. Interesting that you don't see Bob Kane and Bill Finger in those credits, but they always get the credit. Like it's there at the top.
That's
right.
right.
Batman created by.
That's what I was
Bob
going to
Kane
make
and Bill
note
Finger.
of, and then I thought the same thing. I said, well, they get the big
They don't.
credit.
They're out of the special thanks category because they're
Yeah.
already on something else
Yeah.
anyway. So that's been interesting. And yeah, as an exercise, as this series, it's clear at this point, 8 months on, that the Batman is a movie that is definitely worth discussing at that level of detail. And it's a movie that continued, like, every day I'm listening to the score, I'm talking to people about it. We were talking before the show, like I dressed up like Pattinson's Batman for Halloween. It's a definite inflection point for the character, that one that I think we're going to be, the flag's been planted and we're about to be part of this world, the specific Batman iteration, for quite a while to come. And it's a really cool thing to do, to like analyze it on this level now, because there's going to be a lot more to come.
Yeah, I agree. I will say, just to piggyback on what you said before we get to Lauer's thoughts, and I'll pose this as a question instead of a statement. Is the Batman the film The Batman, did it rely more on the Batman mythos and Batman history than any other live action Batman film?
I think it's probably more of a composite of previous influences and stories than probably any other Batman film.
Yeah.
And that's because it was constructed from the ground up that way, versus more of the regular Hollywood way of just hiring a writer and they put their stamp on it, and the other influences come in from other departments as you go. Listening, as we know, this was a long creative process for this film.
Yeah.
The writing process was so laborious and fine-tooth combed. The closest comparison is the Nolan ones, the Nolan films. But yeah, it was very, they knew that they didn't want to be beholden to the comics, but they were very cognizant of like making it. And hearing Matt Reeves talk about it, like a lot of the story that they were coming up with, they had it before he realized, oh, Jeff Loeb, he's my old professor, like he wrote this like groundbreaking like part of the story, and once he found that, it was able to kind of like, he knew he was on the right track.
Reverence is a word I think of when it comes to the Batman. Lauer?
I think Haas said it really well, of got more out of this than I was expecting, with names of some that a little unfamiliar, and then in both of you, of saying who certain writers or artists, things they worked on. It's like, oh yeah, and then my own discovery of certain names in their, some deep holes. Like Herb Novik just stands out because I'm like, I'm more familiar with his work than I knew, and I just haven't read those stories in quite a while. So I, lights to fire under my butt that I want to go revisit some of those.
Read more Batman comics.
Too.
Like,
always
can't get enough
Batman comics.
Yeah.
And I mean, and he partnered up with, Len Wein, great writer. Bob Haney wrote some stories with Neil Adams. Like, go visit that. The bill that you even mentioned of one of them, like such an important issue in Batman history and stuff. So do yourself a favor, and definitely, like, don't just gloss over. Of course, go back and revisit The Long Halloween that Loeb and Sale did, and all these other familiar ones, but like definitely do a favor of going to these lesser known, like unfortunately lesser known writers and artists, because they all had an impact on the guy who made the Batman. And as for, I mean, the Batman as a whole, Bill, I can't wait now that I can actually sit down and watch the movie from beginning to end.
Yeah.
July 6th was the first BOF Social Hour number 72
Okay.
was the first chapter by chapter. So we've been doing this for
4 months.
about 4 months.
Yeah.
That's pretty good for a 3-hour movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so
Thankfully,
I don't know.
I would say that I want to say Matt Reeves, but I don't know if he had anything to do with it. But the way they divided up the Blu-ray into chapters helped to
nice.
keep the time down. And because we're gonna do the Batman next, Haas, or Batman
Or
89
Batman
next.
89.
And like it's got like 77 chapters to it. In a 2-hour
some
movie.
podcasts do it like minute by minute. So each
I've
podcast
seen
is a
that.
minute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I'm glad
for
it's not that
4 of
way.
these others, I'm going to take on the burden of actually watching the film
Oh, damn.
again.
Yeah, good luck.
And I'm going to divide it up for
Oh, you're going to create your own
time
chapter.
purposes for us. Yes. So I won't
makes sense.
we won't have 77 shows of Batman 89 chapter by chapter. I can say that. All right. I will just say that the Batman just might be my favorite live action Batman film for a lot of reasons. It's more in line with what Batman is, my sensibilities, than even anything else. And that's not, and I'm not one of those like, the Batman's my favorite. The Dark Knight trilogy can go suck an ass, anything like that. Those fans do that stuff.
Those sucking ass.
Yeah. Everything's, the new thing comes out and what came before sucks. No, I still adore and love the Dark Knight trilogy, but I think that the Batman history of it that Reeves took reverence in really hits a note with me, because and being able to watch this film the way we did over the last 4 months really hit that home. Now I can go watch Batman 89 chapter by chapter. I may be saying the same thing about it, like, because I'm gonna watch it in such detail. But I don't know how much more detail I can get. I've seen like Batman 89 more than any Batman movie there is. But I've really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to more of this Batman world going forward. Starting with the Penguin, probably maybe next year we'll get it. So that's all I got. So let's plug Lauer. I'll let you go first this time, because I always let you go first. Usually it's Pete, because Pete he's got like 10
I
minute,
can't follow
10-minute
Pete's
thing.
performance.
Yeah.
Mine's simple. Just check out reviews, past interviews, and such with a variety of great people. All that's on Batman on Film. Most recent review is Batman 129. Also, my podcast, The Batman Book Club, had a recent episode dropped summing up, wrapping up all the new Batman comics in October. There you go. That Bill has also generously posted on Batman on Film. It's also available wherever you listen to podcasts. And of course, I can't do a wrap up episode without Boudin Pockets himself, Peter Vera, who I hear loves Little Caesars. There's video evidence of that also on Batman on Film. So I can't track that down. You won't regret that.
Ever since you've came up with Boudin Pockets and told me the story, I just visualize him flying back to New Jersey from Dallas last April and going through security, and he's emptying his stuff out, putting those little dishes, and
putting all the Boudin in the
putting Boudin in the airport through security. All right.
Yep.
Haas, what you got?
I have a podcast just this week. Bill, you posted BOF podcast 203.
That was a good show. I enjoyed listening to it.
Yeah. I'm glad you did. Lots of people got shout outs in that show. It's a initial impressions discussion on the recently released video game Gotham Knights. It's a very hot topic in the Batman world and in the video game world right now. And so me and Chris Clow and Micah Ramey, really broke that down, and and we talk about a lot of other Batman games and things in there. And if you haven't checked it out, please do. Even if you're on the fence on the game or are not a gamer, I would plead, beg, not maybe that, but definitely give it a listen and let us know what you think, because we might do more little video game spin-offs in the future.
Sweet.
People like it.
Yeah, we may have another show coming. We got Batman Film's got like 47 podcasts now, different podcasts. What the hell? Why not?
Why not?
It's a great way to break up the
Yeah.
work, you know.
Yeah. And there are a lot of Batman games to talk about, not
A
just the
lot.
new ones. So,
Hey, if you want to hear video game
Yeah.
talk, go to the Haas. I mean, that's your source. And then
Yeah.
he brings in the professor, Christopher Clow.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. My
yes,
goodness.
my son, he likes video games, right? Right, Ryan? He likes
Yeah.
video games.
Micah is also
Yeah.
really, he's really
Yeah.
good. He's a big
Yeah,
avid gamer.
it's been wild being able to meet, you know, I've been able to meet Micah in person, but now I've been playing Gotham Knights with Micah and with Chris Clow, and it's definitely scratching a Batman itch that I didn't even know needed to be itched or scratched. Like, you know, they're in Gotham, I'm in Gotham, I'm playing as Robin, and then all of a sudden, you know, whoop, there's Red Hood, you know, he's like, hey, and you can, you know, you're talking and you're kind of role playing as it, and you're going around the city and doing missions.
So in other words, you're
Very
like,
interesting.
so that's what that feels like.
That's exactly it. Exactly.
You ever thought, like when you're playing, you were going to think, I'm playing a video game with Bill Ramey's son.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Who was a little boy when you started.
Oh yeah,
with
we
Batman
started
on
to
film. Yeah,
we started talking about references and things. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, what was this, or when did you read that, or why is it the comics like that? I'm like, oh, that, have you not read that? That was, you know,
I can only imagine
he's
those
like,
are the
I was 10,
conversations
you know.
of like, yeah, so Micah, I mean, when you first read The Long Halloween, what did you think of? Oh, no, take this guy down. Take down this stuff. Okay.
That's
right.
basically what it was.
All right. So
like.
anyways, the first
Yeah.
issue, when did you read that?
Yeah, when
That
did
sounds
you
like
read
a
that?
good
Or
time
like,
to me.
yeah, like, so what makes Tim Drake the best Robin? Oh, hold on, let me, like, you know, I need
Combo
hold on,
takedown.
I need to do it. I need to do an inverted takedown here. let me stealth attack this guy first.
good stuff. Yes, check out that show. That is a good podcast. I don't even have a PlayStation 5 yet, but I enjoyed listening to it, and I'd like to play it. And you know what? And I say that because from listening to the show, I just want to try it and see if it's good. You know, see if I like it. So, and I say that I'm the one who got stuck on frickin' Arkham Knight, couldn't get out of that tunnel with damn thing and quit on it.
I thought you did get out eventually.
I never got out of the damn thing.
Oh, you never finished? Oh,
I
dang.
even tried to get Micah or Jake to beat it for me so I could go on, and they were like, oh, it'll take time to do that, you know, old man.
Oh,
So whatever. Okay, so all I got is just go to Batman on Film. That's all that.
All right. Easiest plug.
You'll find comic reviews by all the boys, and you'll find all sorts of stuff, and even you can listen to one of our 425 different podcasts. You can find them on Batman on Film. So for the Ryans, Haas and Lauer, I am Bill. Thanks for listening. Announcer Rachel will take us out. We'll catch you next time. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the BOF Social Hour, Jet's official vlog and podcast on Batman on Film. Follow Jet on Twitter @BatmanOnFilm. Follow the BOF newsfeed on Twitter @TheBatmanOnFilm. For Jet and everyone at BOF, I'm announcer Rachel. Authoritative, definitive, the original, Batman on Film, established in 1998.